On Tuesday afternoon, thousands of pagers issued to Hezbollah operatives all across Lebanon exploded, killing at least a dozen people and hospitalizing more than 3,000 others. And on Wednesday morning, Lebanese media reports indicate that hundreds of Hezbollah walkie-talkies and handheld radios have exploded in a very similar fashion, begging the question, what is going on? And while Israel has not claimed responsibility for these attacks, there seems to be little doubt that Israel is indeed behind them, or maybe more specifically, Israel's covert intelligence agency, the Mossad. But how exactly did Israel manage to stick explosives into thousands of electronic devices destined for a known terrorist organization? And what's going to happen now? That's what I've spent the past 12 hours trying to hash out. So let's dive into what we know and what we don't about this pager attack. I'm Alex Hollings, and this is a very short fuse edition of Firepower. Ground news is an invaluable tool for staying on top of what's going on in the world, while poking a hole through the media bias that is so often present in modern media coverage. Ground news is an aggregator that collects stories published by outlets all around the world and places them all in a single easy-to-read feed. For every story you find on Ground News, they'll give you a brief summary of the topic and then make it very easy to compare headlines covering the same story from different news outlets, depending on their political affiliation. You can even use their location feature to see which countries are covering a story and which ones are giving it the silent treatment. And when you drill down into individual outlets, Ground News will give you their factuality rating based on the individual assessments of 3 separate news monitoring organizations. They'll even tell you who owns an outlet in case you're concerned that could influence their coverage. Here's a great example and a story I wanted to share with you anyway, about legendary F-16 pilot and now Lieutenant General Mark Sassville retiring. Now, Sass, you may recall, was one of 2 pilots, alongside Heather Lucky Penny, who scrambled their F-16s on the morning of September 11th, 2001, intent on intercepting Flight 93. But because there wasn't time to load missiles on either of their aircraft, Sass and Lucky agreed that they would sacrifice themselves, flying straight into Flight 93 with their F-16s to prevent it from finding its target. And while the heroic passengers of Flight 93 ultimately made that sacrifice themselves, the fact that Sass and Lucky did not hesitate and jumped straight into the cockpit for what they knew would be a one-way trip, all in the name of protecting other people, truly represents the best of us. And here on Ground News, we can see that only 9 news outlets have covered the story so far, including 5 left-leaning outlets and only 1 right-leaning one. And if we scroll down the page just a bit to the bias distribution, we can see that this story is a bit of a blind spot for everybody, but in particular, right-leaning outlets. And this bias distribution metric really matters because bias in news coverage isn't just about how stories are covered, it's also about which stories are covered and which aren't. And you can use the blind spot feature on Ground News to help you find stories like that are getting a lot of traction in one political sphere and not the other. And if you want to use Ground News like I do, I can get you a great deal. Just go to ground.news/sandboxx with 2 X's or follow the link in the description below to get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use every day. Again, that's ground.news/sandboxx with 2 X's to get 40% off their Vantage plan to help you stay on top of things. Yesterday afternoon, as I record this, explosions rang out across Lebanon as thousands of pagers carried by operatives of the militant group Hezbollah detonated in what now appears to be a concerted attack mounted by Israeli forces. According to Lebanon's health minister, at least 12 people have been confirmed dead, and at least 3,000 more were injured in the attack, though thus far Israel has not claimed responsibility for what may be the most unprecedented counter-terror operation in modern history. A second attack reportedly followed on Wednesday, this time with handheld radios apparently exploding in a very similar fashion. And according to eyewitness reports from across Lebanon, Tuesday's attack began at 3:45 p.m. local time, with smoke billowing out of people's pockets before small explosions, often compared to fireworks or gunshots, went off. According to American intelligence officials cited by the New York Times, that were packed with as little as 1 to 2 ounces of explosive material placed next to the battery, with a switch embedded to trigger a detonation upon receiving a specific signal. This allowed Israeli forces to specifically target Hezbollah operatives who had been issued pagers by the terrorist organization. This attack proved particularly effective because Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, issued strict orders about the use of cell phones within the group in February of this year, allegedly due to their vulnerability to Israeli surveillance. As a result, Hezbollah, which is designated a terrorist organization by the United States, the Gulf Arab countries, the Arab League, and much of the Western world, turned to more than 5,000 pagers they ordered from a Taiwanese company called Gold Apollo. I'm going to quote Karen Elazari, an Israeli cybersecurity analyst and researcher at the Tel Aviv University. This attack hit them in their Achilles heel because they took out a central means of communication. We have seen these types of devices, pagers, targeted before, but not in an attack this sophisticated. Now, according to officials, the majority of these pagers were Gold Apollo AR-924 models, though at least 2 other pager models were allegedly also included in the attack. These pagers were distributed to Hezbollah operatives as far out as Syria and Iran, though the vast majority remained inside Lebanon. Now, how exactly Israel managed to do this remains a huge question mark, though Gold Apollo has already begun distancing itself from the operation by disclosing that they did not manufacture these pagers. According to the Taiwanese firm, they instead licensed their brand to another company, BAC Consulting, out of Budapest, Hungary, who then built and distributed the pagers. Now, this relationship dates back roughly 3 years, according to Gold Apollo's founder and president. I'll quote him here. "That product isn't ours. They're just sticking on our company brand." Now, Gold Apollo's website was updated on Tuesday to reflect the same, writing, "We only provide brand trademark authorization and have no involvement in the design or manufacturing of this product." Their listings for the AR-924 pagers were also taken down. For their part, BAC Consulting's website was still up on Tuesday, though when we called the phone number listed on their page, we got no answer. By Wednesday morning, when we returned, the website had been taken down. And it only gets fishier from there. The stated address for the company is a 2-story building on a residential street in a Budapest suburb. Now, a person at that address was approached by journalists from Reuters yesterday afternoon, and that person reportedly explained that BAC Consulting was registered at that address, but had no physical presence there. And BAC Consulting's chief executive officer, Cristina Barsoni Arcadiacano, told NBC News on Tuesday, "I don't make pagers. I'm just the intermediate. I think you got it wrong." The company's LinkedIn profile does not mention any manufacturing, instead listing its business consulting and services. Now, Arcadiacano's LinkedIn account lists her as a strategic advisor and business developer who studied politics at the London School of Economics and Politics. Among the positions on her profile is serving on the board of directors for a sustainability group called the Earthchild Institute. However, she's not mentioned anywhere on that organization's website. BAC Consulting was registered as a limited liability corporation in May of 2022, meaning they could not have been working with Gold Apollo for 3 years. According to publicly available company records, the firm had a revenue of $725,768 in their first year of operation, back in 2022. They brought in $593,972 in 2023, and they currently have holdings of just 7,840 euros. Some news agencies, including the Associated Press, have since begun referring to BAC Consulting as little more than a shell company. Taiwan's export regulatory organization, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, echoed Gold Apollo's claims, saying that they had no record of direct exports of these pagers to Lebanon, with more than 260,000 similar pagers exported between 2022 and August of this year, mostly to customers in American and European markets. According to Reuters, a senior Lebanese security source claimed the explosives were placed inside the pagers months ago, which suggests they were either shipped with the explosives already inside, or the shipments themselves were intercepted en route to Lebanon before being modified and then allowed to continue on their way. But N.R. Jensen Jones, the director of the technical intelligence consulting firm Armament Research Group, doesn't buy that, and I'll quote him directly. The scale suggests a complex supply chain attack rather than a scenario in which devices were intercepted and modified in transit. And that sentiment was echoed by a senior Lebanese source who spoke to Reuters under the condition of anonymity, who claimed the devices had been modified by Israel's Mossad, quote, at the production level. I'll quote him here. The Mossad injected a board inside of the device that has explosive material that receives a code. It's very hard to detect through any means. Now, these unprecedented attacks on electronic devices, starting with pagers and seemingly now extending into handheld radios, are sure to heighten tensions between Israel and Hezbollah, which maintains the most potent military force inside Lebanon and has become a significant political power within the nation. While much of the world considers Hezbollah to be a terrorist organization, it is worth noting that a small number of nations apply that title only to the group's armed military wing. Now, Hezbollah has been described as a state within a state inside Lebanon, established amid the Lebanese civil war that spanned from 1975 through 1990. Like Hamas and several other terror organizations in the region, Hezbollah is backed by Iranian funding and support. In fact, Hezbollah was initially established through direct funding provided by Iran through their Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, a unique Iranian institution that establishes, trains, and funds Iranian proxy forces all throughout the region. In a 1985 manifesto that enshrined Hezbollah's ideology, the group pledged allegiance to Iran's supreme leader. Since its founding, Hezbollah has established a reputation for brutality inside Lebanon, even against rival Shiite militias like the Amal movement. The organization was also responsible for the 1983 bombing of US and French troops in barracks in Beirut, killing at least 300 people. Now, Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has claimed to control more than 100,000 militants, though independent assessments place the real figure at somewhere between 20,000 and 50,000, though many are hardened veterans of other Middle Eastern conflicts like the Syrian civil war. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates Hezbollah maintains a stockpile of some 120,000 to maybe even 200,000 rockets and missiles of varying sorts, most of which are unguided, but a small number are anti-air and anti-ship missiles. The last time war broke out between Israel and Hezbollah was in 2006, when a Hezbollah raid across the border prompted an Israeli invasion aimed at eliminating the threat posed by the group. Hezbollah, however, survived this offensive and has since been rebuilding its strength. Some experts, like those at the Institute for National Security Studies, argue that Hezbollah will work to avoid open war with Israel, as the group already faces growing distrust among the Lebanese people for its alleged role in the massive 2020 Beirut port explosions, and Hezbollah's subsequent obstruction of investigations into that event. Growing support for the Lebanese Forces Party within Lebanon, which the Council for Foreign Relations describes as a group that aims to disarm Hezbollah, points toward the terror organization's loosening grip on political power inside Lebanon, and open war with a vastly superior Israeli military would likely only worsen that situation unless Israel can be painted as the clear aggressor. Hezbollah has, however, vowed to retaliate, releasing a statement on Tuesday evening saying, quote, "This criminal and treacherous enemy will definitely receive fair punishment for this sinful assault, both in ways that are expected and unexpected." Now, Hezbollah has launched a reported 8,000 unguided munitions into Israel since the Hamas attack on October 8th that precipitated Israel's ongoing and wildly controversial offensive into the Gaza Strip, a military operation many have taken to describing as a genocide. Israel has responded to Hezbollah's attacks with airstrikes and even occasional tank and artillery fire, but thus far, open conflict has been avoided. American officials have claimed the U.S. had no foreknowledge of these pager and radio attacks. And while the overall death toll of these attacks is fairly low, there are a number of very important things to consider. First is the impact these attacks are having on Lebanon's medical infrastructure, overwhelming some hospitals with injuries and casualties resulting from these explosions, which certainly could be a strategically viable first step in a larger offensive. The second important thing to consider is the psychological impact these attacks are sure to have on Hezbollah operatives who now can't trust their pagers and can't trust their radios, dramatically limiting communications within the sprawling organization in a very hectic and chaotic time. And again, that could point toward a precursor for a larger offensive, or just an extremely effective kinetic psychological operation. Now, I am well aware of the political and cultural complexities involved in covering this attack and Israeli combat operations throughout the region, especially in Gaza. And as a result, there will be lots of folks reading deep into my word choices looking for some inferred bias. But I'm here to tell you that bias isn't my job. My job is to tell you what happened and what I've been able to find out. And that's all I've got for you. And that will do it for this short-fused edition of Firepower from Sandboxx News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure to swing by sandboxnews.com today and every day for all the latest in news, entertainment, and motivation from all around the force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and subscribe down below, and leave me a comment so I know what I should cover next. And of course, don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandboxx News.